Everyday consumers are being bombarded with the next big thing in health, wellness, and fitness. What's the future of keeping ourselves healthy, and what's just a passing fad? Hi, I'm Joey Thurman, and if you don't know me, I'm a health and fitness expert and author. I've been fortunate enough to work with celebrities, athletes, C-suite executives, and everyone in between. I've been featured on the Today Show, Live with Kelly and Ryan, Good Morning America, TEDx, and lots of other publications. As part of my ever-increasing thirst for knowledge, which ironically happened after college, I decided to create the Fad or Future podcast. What sets this podcast apart is that I am the guinea pig for these episodes. I don't only want to bring in world-class experts on the show, I want to truly get a first-hand experience what it's like to, say, go on ketamine and trip for my depression, go on a 3-day fast drinking nothing but coffee and water for age reversal, eat nothing but plants and get the blood work done to back it up, or even get my brain mapped to see how messed up my head is from getting knocked around playing hockey. Once I try these things, I bring on the experts to talk about my experience and explain it to the audience in a digestible manner and ask the true question. Is it a fad or is it the future? Because after all, we don't want to be fatties. What's up? It's Joey Thurman. We have another episode of the Fad or Future podcast. And if you are into nutrition and you haven't heard of this guy, you've been living under a rock. Aragon, nutrition researcher. Man, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I went to a seminar a few years ago where you're speaking in front of hundreds of people, so you didn't see my ugly mug, but I listened to you there. I started following you, and I subscribed to your Aragon Research Review, and it's such an honor to have you sitting in here, and I truly appreciate you coming out.
Joey, it is an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, man. So what is it that you do? You're a nutrition researcher. That's something you don't hear that often.
Yeah, it's really weird. When people ask me what I do, I've resorted to telling people that I am a footnote at the bottom of people's term papers.
Okay, you're a good footnote, though.
That's what I am. I'm a freaking citation at the end of the term papers, at the end of your school project. So,
all right, cool. So basically, you do a lot of research, and you look at different studies, and then you kind of compare them and do your sort of analysis on it. Is that what happens?
Yeah. There's a whole lot of. I forgot who said this, but somebody once said, there's a whole lot of evidence, but not enough judgment.
Okay, so you're judging.
So I'm judgy.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
We have a lot of information, and so with all these different little bits of information, the challenge is taking that information and finding out what is applicable in practice. We've got all kinds of info, from the micromanaging stuff to the big picture stuff, but how do we take these concepts, how do we take these findings and actually produce results, long-lasting results? So that's always the challenge.
Right.
So yeah, and that's one of the things that got me into research, because a scientific basis for doing this stuff, as opposed to just shooting in the dark or listening to the best-looking or best-built person in the room, we can get a little bit more methodical about it. So yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. So I got a little spitfire round for you, then we're actually going to get into things. So I just want you to answer fad or future.
Ooh.
Okay?
Okay.
Paleo.
Future.
Keto.
Future.
Vegan.
Fad.
/ plant-based. It depends on the term.
In
right?
between, yeah.
In between. Vegetarian.
Future.
Carnivore.
Fad.
Weight Watchers.
Fad.
South Beach.
Dude, you're just incriminating me with every question here, man.
South Beach.
Fad.
Cookie diet. This is one when I was a kid.
Fad.
Oh, okay. Cleanses.
Fad.
Detoxes.
Fad.
Intermittent fasting.
Future. Begrudging future.
Okay. Water fasting. We're days of no eating.
Fad.
Okay. Living to 120.
Future.
Okay. Game changers.
Big fad.
Okay. If it fits your macros.
Back to the future.
Okay. Colonics and chlorophyll up your butt.
Wow. Can I just say wow?
All right, wow. And spandex.
future.
Okay, all right. How was that for you? That was good, huh?
That was good. I'm
Yeah.
hoping people just kind of take things with a grain of salt, because little sound bites can be dangerous.
Yeah, no. Believe me, I'll run everything past you ahead of time. I just wanted to kind of break the ice here. That was pretty good.
Oh, it's broken.
It is broken. All right. So now, with what you do, what's a typical day look like for you?
Okay, typical day. Yeah, I made a decision a long time ago. I guess it was 2010, 2012, where I transitioned out of a brick and mortar in-person counseling practice to just being full-time online.
Mm-hmm.
So since roughly 2012, I've been working out of my computer. So I've got 2 kids, 1 wife, and
one wife.
Right,
Oh,
right.
Okay.
And I enjoy being at home, and so I get up, I have my coffee. A few hours later, I have my breakfast, and the whole time I'm on the computer. In the afternoon, I hit the gym with my wife. I come back, work some more, and the kids get back home eventually, and then it's just dinner time and hangout time, and then 3 days a week is like movie time with the family.
Okay.
So it is one of the most plain vanilla, boring routines you'll ever hear.
Okay.
It used to be different,
Yeah.
as I stopped drinking alcohol 100%. I literally have not had a drop of alcohol since August 25th, 2018.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
congrats.
Yeah, so the routine back then would be like me being at the computer way into the night, drinking wine, So yeah, it's better now.
All right, cool. Now, I feel like we put ourselves in a box, right? Everybody wants to be in some sort of box, like whether they're keto or paleo or whatever. Why do you feel like we need to have this sense of belonging with whatever the hell diet that we're on?
I think that relates to maybe the three basic psychological needs that humans have. And this is related to self-determination theory. So we all have a need to be autonomous, or in other words, we all have a need to feel like we're in some kind of control and making our own decisions with respect to how our lives go.
Right.
And the second one would be competence. So we all have the need to feel like we're effective at whatever we're deciding to do. And then the third basic psychological need is relatedness or belonging.
Right.
And so under that tab, that's where it really kind of becomes important for us to feel like we're part of a group that accepts us and loves us and maybe even admires us at times, and to feel like an effective member within that community.
Right.
So I think that's the big one, in addition to the other two, that captures people into wanting to identify as either a vegan, a carnivore. Usually people don't walk into a room and go, I'm an omnivore, guys. I'm into moderation. That usually doesn't happen.
Right.
But that's my guess at why we would want to kind of put ourselves in these boxes.
Yeah. I mean, with working with people for, how long? 13 years now. It was like, what type of exercise do you give people? I'm like, what type of goals do you have? What type of exercise do you need? What's your, I have a decent amount of nutritional knowledge, nowhere near as much as like a dietitian or something, or we're not even getting into the, what is a nutritionist type thing, which I saw one of your posts, which was pretty entertaining.
That's interesting.
But everybody wants to be put in some sort of box, but if I've got a movie star coming in to train them, I'm going to train them entirely different because they've got 3 months and it's their career. So yeah, you're working out twice a day with me. Most people, what I say, coming twice a day, absolutely not. So context is king, and I think the same thing comes into play with what you're eating too. And I see a lot of the stuff that you put out there. I mean, there's a lot of different options, and it is nice to see that. But I can see that. Why are people getting so confused about what the hell to eat? Like it's something that seems so simple.
Yeah, it does seem so simple, but the problem that I see is that in spite of people's credentials, in spite of their paper credentials as a physician or as a doctor this, a PhD that, people still carry in their cognitive biases with them, regardless of how brilliant they are, regardless of their credentials. And then everybody with these pre-existent biases just firing off 10 different diet recommendations, to the unwitting public, then they just don't know who the hell to listen to.
Right.
And it is super confusing because there's so many different messages about what everybody needs to do. What's the best diet? Yeah, it's confusing.
Along those lines. So, what is everybody can say that they're a nutritionist now, but what is that quantifying difference between nutritionist, dietitian, having some sort of online certification? Who should people listen to when you have these credentials?
That's a big messy question.
Yeah.
Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. And I say that a little bit carefully because that landscape is changing a bit. Nutritionist is a legally protected term in certain geographic locales, even in the U.S., but for the most part across the country, there is no legal protection on the word nutritionist. So your dog can be a nutritionist, your cat can be a nutritionist, and but dietitian is a protected term. Registered dietitian is a protected term. There are pros and cons with listening to dietitians. The pros of listening to dietitians is that you're going to get, I want to say, like at least 75% solid information.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 25% of the information you get from dietitians is subject to their compliance with, in quotes, big food.
Right. Right. You got massive quotes.
And in with big food comes, big cola, there are certain lobbies that are pretty strong. But yeah, that's kind of the game we play, and those are the chances we take. Somebody's got to pay for the science. Somebody's got to pay for the research.
Right.
So if people complain about funding source for example, the dairy industry, okay, are you going to pitch in to do the research on what the effects of dairy are, good or bad? So yeah, we're at the mercy of who can pay for what.
Okay. So, what should people be eating? That's a huge question, right? But it seems like it should be so simple. What the hell are we supposed to eat to be healthy?
That is a great question, and I love that question because the answer to it gets so many people mad.
Right.
Okay. There is a wide margin of it doesn't matter.
Okay.
In terms of what people should eat, you look at populations across the globe, and you see communities eating extremely different sets of foods. Even macronutritionally, carbohydrate, protein, fat is just drastically different across different geographical locations.
Right.
And this is the thing with humans. The thing with humans is this: we are almost just like dogs, but even more resilient and even more impervious to adverse effects of different foods. Like you feed a dog chocolate, and that can be deadly.
Yeah, they're gonna have some problems. Yeah.
We humans, barring allergies, barring intolerances, which make up, a minority of the population, we can survive and thrive on almost anything you throw at us, and depending on genetic capacity, depending on just your underlying wiring, it almost doesn't matter in terms of macronutrition. So like high carb, low fat, high carb, that stuff literally doesn't matter unless you are engaged in certain sports that have very specific demands for high intensity work output.
Right.
Then it matters. But if you're talking about the general population, it honest to God doesn't matter if one guy is keto and he likes it and the other guy is like, Pritikin level and he loves it, the high carb, low fat thing. What does matter among those two camps is, are you getting enough protein daily in order to support lean body mass? Are you getting enough total calories to support your activity requirements? And those two together, it's like, are you getting enough of those things and not too much of those things to the degree that you are accumulating excess body fat?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it honestly doesn't matter. Now, let me qualify that a little bit. It is entirely possible to create a diet that compromises your health and longevity. You can create a diet where, for example, a high-carb diet where all of your carbohydrate sources just from straight ahead table sugar, straight out of the jar.
Yeah.
Okay, that's obviously not a good idea. So there's something to be said about whole foods and minimally refined foods with respect to a couple things. Number one, their nutrient density.
Okay.
So you can eat a crappy enough diet to the degree that you actually are deficient in essential micronutrition, even if you're fine in macronutrition. And then the other issue with eating a highly refined diet or ultra-processed diets,
Right.
you miss out on the satiety factor. So satiety is, in a nutshell, it's your body's ability to feel satisfied or full,
Right.
and not just wanting to eat through the whole pantry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are those things to take into account when I say that it doesn't freaking matter. When
Yeah.
I say it doesn't freaking matter, I mainly mean high carb versus low carb.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you say, so I mean, everybody gets into the protein debate, and you say to maintain lean body mass. What does that look like for your average individual? How much per gram, per either kilogram or pound?
Yeah, the protein question is something that's been investigated for the last 50 years, and we're going to keep investigating it because that's how we are. We need something to do. It's a first world problem,
Right.
So with protein, the scientific consensus, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of when we did it was Rob Morton and Stu Phillips and a bunch of other good bros. We did a meta-analysis on the amount of protein that would be ideal for building muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is building muscle within a non-dieting condition. Okay, so it's not hypocaloric conditions where you're eating less than you're burning for the purpose of weight loss.
Yep.
We only included studies that were at minimum eucaloric or at maintenance weight maintenance levels. Weight maintenance to slight surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at all the relevant studies, and we found that about 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is the sweet spot. So
Okay.
in American terms, that's 0.7 grams per pound. 0.7 grams per pound of body weight would be kind of like the sweet spot
Right.
to maintain or even gain lean body mass,
Yep.
protein-wise.
So for me, 200 pounds, about 150 grams.
Roughly, yeah.
Look at that, quick math. I'm
Yeah,
smart.
quick maths.
I'm smarter than I look.
Love that, man. I couldn't have done that. Asian privilege and everything. I couldn't have done that.
Really, man, craziness. All right, so does it matter what type of sources that people are getting, whether it's protein powders or plant-based or pea protein or whey protein or casein or whatever the hell?
Yeah, these are good questions because they have the most complicated answers,
Right.
man. Generally speaking, animal protein sources are better than plant protein sources.
Okay.
And this is because they're a higher quality of protein. And the most reasonable definition of protein quality is its percentage of essential amino acids. And also, within those essential amino acids, you have the key anabolic amino acids being the branch chain amino acids. Then within the branch chains, you have that key driver being leucine. And so when you look at animal protein sources versus plant protein sources, the plant protein sources are going to generally be a lot lower in essential amino acids,
Okay.
and lower in the BCAAs and lower in leucine.
Right.
Now, I have to throw in a little wrinkle there, because when you score protein in the different quality rankings, we're mainly looking at composition of the protein, amino acid-wise. And there are some other ways to look at protein rankings, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so what there is not enough research of is comparing head-to-head different proteins on their effects on body composition.
Okay.
And let alone different proteins' effects on body composition under conditions where people are training, resistance training preferably. So there's some interesting and as yet unreplicated research on pea protein,
Mm-hmm.
showing that it is able to keep up with whey protein
Really?
for increasing muscle thickness in this particular study. And so that kind of raised some eyebrows, and yeah, we can quibble over the design of the study and all that, but it kind of gave rise to the possibility that even though a protein is plant-based, it may have some magic to it that may be able to run with the big boys like whey.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say generally speaking, animal proteins are superior, but there could be some exceptions.
All right. Now, what about this research coming out and these longevity experts that are talking about when you're having all this animal protein and you're having this elevated mTOR response, right? And then that is essentially, going to cause, murder on our cells. and I mean, like David Sinclair talks about that in his book Lifespan, where he says like meat is murder on our cells. So like, what is your response? I mean, mTOR, we need that to add muscle tissue, and muscle tissue can be preserving to our joints and bones and all sorts of stuff. But then now we're not supposed to have enough. I mean, how do you kind of work through that?
Okay, so here's the deal with that. People promoting that idea, Sinclair, there's others. What is I call them the longevity nutters. It's a whole camp of people who are just restrict your protein. Longo is the god.
I was about to say, Robert Longo, right?
Oh boy, it's some exotic first name, and then the last name is Longo.
Yeah.
But he's worshipped in that area. And here's the thing: the data on yeast, so single-celled organisms, data on worms, flies, and even rodents shows some benefit to protein restriction, because we can look at the lifespans of these animals and go, okay, well, that affected that, and so therefore this. Well, here's the issue. Once you get to non-human primates, the data is equivocal. So some of it shows protein restriction extends life, some of it doesn't. And now we go all the way to humans, and we start looking at what are the aspects of aging that are most critical to our degeneration as a species during our short little time on Earth. And one of the most important signs of degeneration in humans with respect to the aging process is loss of lean body mass, loss of bone mass. Sarcopenia would be kind of the clinical term for the wasting of lean body mass. And with the onset of sarcopenia starting in older age, you really have to question the whole idea that we need to restrict protein. There is no compelling data that in humans protein restriction will do us any good. So, and conversely, there's no data in humans that eating a crap load of protein is going to just accelerate our descent into this horrible death.
Right.
So with the longevity question, as it applies to protein, I would rather look at it like this. How can we optimize the growth and the maintenance of lean body mass as long as possible? And that would be a major contributor to extending our lifespan and our health span. So my father died recently, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's tough, but it toughened me up, and I still believe that he's upstairs making sure I'm behaving. Yeah. So he died of complications of lean body mass loss. So one of the things that happens when you get sarcopenia is you become immobile. And so once you can't get up from a chair, and this was the result of an aortic aneurysm surgery he had that he just had a tough time recovering from. So it wasn't like he volitionally stopped training and eating and caring. Right. So what happened was he became immobile, unable to get up from a chair by himself, unable to walk around. And when that happens, bro, everything is downhill from there.
Right.
just everything, just structurally, metabolically, your immune system, everything goes down. And so if we can look at aging from the standpoint of maximizing musculoskeletal functional capacity, that's not going to happen from restricting protein.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about we need to freaking slam, a whole cow with each meal.
Right.
But the weight of the evidence, as it stands today, shows that among the general population, protein intake somewhere between 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilo is appropriate for preventing sarcopenia. Mm-hmm. And there's another phenomenon associated with that called sarcopenic obesity, where you kind of get a combination of fat gain with lean mass loss, and that's a bad thing too, from a metabolic syndrome standpoint. But there's different ways to look at this. If you are a lifter, if you train, if you even lift, bro.
Do you lift, bro?
If you even lift, bro, then you are definitely not going to be restricting protein. You're going to be using protein as a weapon in the arsenal for longevity.
Right. Because, then you start having the sarcopenia and you fall down and you break a hip and you're 80 years old and then going under a knife is going to be a big problem for you as well. Then you have that hip replacement and all that sort of shit. So
those mechanisms like mTOR and IGF-1 and all that they're zeroing in on that might impede the longevity capacity.
Yeah.
That is missing the forest for the trees.
Okay.
Because we need to be freaking training, we need to be lifting, and we need to be active for as long as possible. But when we stop being able to do that, nothing matters anymore.
Right. Is there something that people, because let's say that this research is valid. Maybe could you have a little higher protein consumption days when you're actually lifting and lower protein consumption days, maybe a little bit more towards that 1.2, or maybe even 1, you drop that down on days when you're not lifting? Is there any research or validity behind that, or we're just kind of grasping at straws now?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. And it depends on the person's goal. If somebody is gunning to actually gain lean body mass, or if they're in a compromised position to put on lean body mass, like, for example, if they're in the throes of sarcopenia, older individuals already have a certain degree of in quotes, anabolic resistance. So if you lowball protein in that population, they're not going to be able to utilize protein as efficiently as younger folks do. So you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you kind of lowball that population.
Okay.
So, but if somebody is at a certain level where they have a favorable amount of lean body mass, muscle tissue, and function and everything like that, and they're not necessarily trying to gun for the gains,
right?
Then the lower training days or lower training periods, I can see 1.2 not being an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Gun for the gains, and do you even lift, bro?
Yes.
I like that.
We got to bring that back. It's all like 10 years ago stuff.
Oh, we'll bring it back.
People are forgetting about it.
We are bringing it back. What are you excited about now with nutrition and where your research is headed?
Wow. I really like the idea that we can try to simplify recommendations. I really like the idea that one size doesn't fit all. Mm-hmm. So there is a wide spectrum of preferences and what people will actually stick to. So the whole idea of how do we find out what people prefer and what they'll stick to, how do we find that out? How do we get the truth out of people for that? Because that's really the key to helping people stick to something for a long period of time. And it is exciting that there is such a wide range of diet archetypes that work very well with different types of people.
So for you, you're not one to say that. We touched on this before, that you need to be a certain way, and you're not of the plant-based camp or the keto camp or whatever. You just want people to essentially, eat much better. And you actually made a post about it. You said, "Isn't it ironic that we agree on the health impact of the dietary variables that we mostly agree upon?"
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what were you getting at there? Like what are we're disagreeing on a bunch of stuff that really is kind of irrelevant, right?
Yeah. One of the things that people are nitpicking over is nutrient timing within the course of a day.
Uh-huh.
Like, should you be front loading your carbohydrate, or should you be back loading your carbohydrate? Should you have 3 meals a day, or 5, or 6? That stuff, honestly,
Doesn't matter.
It may make 1% of a difference across, or even less. And it's just incredible how much people assume that these things matter in the big picture, when these things might not matter in the course of a lifetime,
Right.
compared to the things that do matter. Like, I can picture somebody, we'll use the carbohydrate example again. You take one guy where most of his carbs are from sweet potatoes, and veggies and fruits, or just potatoes, period, and veggies and fruits and legumes and whole food based carbohydrate sources. And then you take another guy who's just socking down, let's take the iconic Pop-Tart, where all his carbs.
Man, I used to take Pop-Tarts as a kid, and we'll circle back and put them in there, and I put fucking butter on the Pop-Tarts as well.
You were ahead of your time.
Dude, I mean, it was amazing. Anybody listening, do not do that. That is not good for you. Alan's the expert here, but I can tell you right now, emphatically, don't put butter on your Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarts, if you want to send me some free Pop-Tarts and sponsor the show, I'm okay with that.
Ooh. I haven't had Pop-Tarts in decades.
Oh, my God.
But now that you mention your brand of bulletproof Pop-Tarts, I think we may have something there.
All right, we got it. Okay, so circling back on the bullet.
Right. So if you were to if you were to compare somebody who got all of his carbs from bulletproof Pop-Tarts versus a guy who got his carbs from peas, beans, corn, yams, squash, potatoes, whole grain sources, and I say whole grains with caution, because you can go to the supermarket right now and pull up a bag of whole grain goldfish. You know, I mean, the definition of whole grain is very very nebulous.
So you can just slap whatever the hell label they want on the stuff now. It's not really that much regulated.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. And you can find all kinds of whole grain junk foods. And you know, truth of the matter is, like, most whole grain foods are freaking junk foods.
Right.
So and that's why when you mentioned the paleo thing, with paleo, is it fad or is it future?
Right.
I said future specifically because I although I was annoyed that paleo didn't like dairy and grains and legumes, I'm not all that annoyed about paleo's gripe against grains as a whole.
Okay.
Because grains almost are a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to combine refined grain products with added fat, which is hilarious. I mean, you're talking about the Pop-Tarts that you did. And create a hyper-palatable, easy-to-overconsume food that leads you down a path of destruction.
Right.
So, yeah.
That makes sense. So now, you weren't a fan of paleo, saying that they want to exclude the dairies, essentially.
I'm so not a fan of that.
And why not?
Dairy is the best one-stop shop in nature that we know of for muscle building and bone building nutrition, all in one shot. And it does that stuff spectacularly. And when we look at the totality of evidence for or against dairy, it is, I would even say, overwhelmingly in favor of dairy when you look at all the different health parameters. So, and yeah, people will point to the fact that 2/3 of the population is lactose intolerant, so therefore 2/3 of the population shouldn't eat dairy. Well, guess what? There's things that are low lactose. There's a lot of dairy foods that are low lactose. You know, everything from cheese to certain types of yogurt. You know, you don't have to be swilling down milk all day and feel like that's the only dairy source.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what about people who say that dairy is causing this inflammation in their body, and like that we should avoid milk and cheeses and all these other things? What's your response to when somebody is saying that?
It's just a matter of, okay, well, that sounds good at maybe a visceral or gut level, or it sounds good on paper. Dairy, inflammation, yeah, I remember sucking down a ton of milkshakes and then I was freaking bloated the next day, you know? But when you look at the scientific literature, you do a search on dairy and inflammation, PubMed, you will find an overwhelming amount of data showing that dairy is either neutral or beneficial to decreasing inflammation. And this is something that I actually looked up within the past few years because the whole dairy and inflammation thing started circulating the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that sounds interesting. And so when you look at the evidence, you're like, wow, it's just the exact opposite. Yeah. So,
And those weren't studies sponsored by the dairy industry.
They probably were.
Okay, all right. We had to get that caveat.
They probably were sponsored by Big Milkshake.
Okay.
But there is some interesting research. Like dairy cannot be looked at as this homogeneous unit, like this single food. Dairy foods have different effects on health depending on the dairy food. So something, for example, we'll take butter. Butter makes stuff taste good. And so things that taste good can improve your mood and improve your quality of life. And as long as you keep them within moderation and you consume them judiciously, and then you don't consume them within the context of a diet that's overall too much calories and you're accumulating body fat and you're sedentary and you're smoking and you're drinking like a fish, butter's fine.
Right.
Now, if you compare the effects of butter with the effects of cheese, this is a freaking interesting line of research. Cheese happens to be fine with blood lipids. It has a neutral effect on blood lipid profile.
Really?
So certain blood lipid profiles or trends can be atherogenic, meaning it's going to lead you down the path towards heart disease, which is typically the increase in LDL and decrease in HDL. Cheese doesn't do that. It's very freaking interesting. Now, if you look at butter, on the other hand, well, butter can have a tendency to do that.
Okay.
So we can't look at dairy as a single entity.
Okay.
Yeah, there's wrinkles to that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at like like a Greek yogurt versus cheese versus butter versus milk, like you can't put them all into one boat there.
You can't roll them all up into one. Yeah.
Okay. What about butter in your coffee?
Butter in your coffee.
I mean, I wasn't gonna brag. This is not in my notes, but we're talking about butter. So the bulletproof butter in the coffee, and then MCT and your bulletproof coffee, or whatever the hell name you want to put on it. What are your thoughts on that? And then being in this like keto, like let's go down this in this like ketogenic state, right?
Okay. Butter in your coffee is mainly comedy. Okay.
It's delicious.
Here's the thing: like I've tried coconut oil in my coffee because I love coconut oil, man. I anything coconutty, I love it.
Yeah.
I haven't tried buttered coffee. I wanted to do a thing where I would meet a friend at Bulletproof. Is there still a Bulletproof coffee shop in Santa Monica, or did they close it down?
There's, I mean, the Bulletproof owns everything. I mean, I don't know if there's one there, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to try Bulletproof coffee and then maybe just troll my Instagram audience or something like that.
Yeah.
But
at the Alan Aragon, by the way.
At the Alan Aragon,
Okay.
yes. And I'm neutral to it. It's like if that butter that you put in your coffee is within the context of an otherwise healthy diet and lifestyle, and you enjoy your buttered coffee, even with MCT, then that's cool and that's fine.
Right.
What does annoy me is when the claim is made that the butter in the coffee is somehow adding to your health or your performance. Like people say, yeah, that butter in the coffee, man, it really makes you really mentally
Makes your brain
alert.
work better, right?
Yeah,
That's the claim, like the brain octane fuel and the butter, and that's what they're saying is that your body's become fat adapted, right? And then it's going to utilize that.
Yeah, it's
fat or future.
Yeah, that is absolutely a fad.
Okay.
And here's the thing, man. It's all about context. I think that you can live a perfectly healthy and long life buttering your coffee as long as the rest of the context is good.
Butter your coffee, not your biscuits.
I got to try the buttered coffee, man.
Okay,
it's been a while since that trend, and I still haven't tried it. But I would have to throw this in there, too. They actually compared the effects of cream versus butter on blood lipids. And interestingly, cream had a neutral effect on blood lipids, while butter had an adverse effect on blood lipids. So it raised, I believe it was the ratio of ApoB to ApoA. So the ApoB subparticle is the atherogenic subparticle. And this was raised with butter, but not with cream. And the reason why is because of a structure called the milk fat globule membrane.
Okay.
Okay, so with cream, that membrane is intact. With butter, it's essentially churned out of the food. So that butter has some sort of protective effect,
Right.
health protective effect, that you're churning out of butter versus cream. So I found that to be kind of interesting. So not only do you have less mess and cleanup with cream, but it has more favorable effects on blood lipids compared to butter.
So the cream seems to be the better option over.
Yeah, if you were to
butter.
nitpick,
Yeah.
if you were to nitpick, yeah,
Right.
yeah, good
Well,
old
this
cream.
is what we're talking about. People are going to nitpick everything, right? They're going to think that this is going to matter as much, but in turn, if they're having a bunch of other crap the rest of the day, like this can be insignificant.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that I got around that there. So what are some fads that you're seeing right now that you want to dispel or that you wish would go away?
Okay, well, the big overarching fad is that everybody needs to get on X diet. Everybody needs to get on. Twitter is a haven for carbophobia. It just, there's something about Twitter that attracts every single keto and carnivore nut in the world.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the character limit. Everybody's got ADHD and they enjoy going like twickering, bickering.
Right.
And,
Twickering, bickering on Twitter. Yeah.
and so that is kind of annoying. The whole idea that even clinically for diabetes, like people are behaving like physicians or dietitians and telling people how to cure their diabetes. Just cut the carbs out. Just cut it out.
Yeah.
And per the evidence, that's not the solution.
Yes, I remember when we got on the phone, was it last year, and you sent me, a nutrition plan to like lose some weight and stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I can eat carbs, dude. Sweet. Yeah, but I mean, I did that, and I felt good, and I put on some muscle, and I'm stay pretty lean as it is, but yeah, it was interesting.
Awesome.
Like, and I'm like, does it matter when I have these carbs or whatever? And even on there, I think, and then like the guide that you gave me, it's like, eat these, and it doesn't really matter when you eat the carbs. So I'm not going to have these carbs late at night, and all of a sudden it's going to turn into fat, right?
Yeah. In fact, there's a study that everybody keeps forgetting about. It's a 2011 study. The lead author is Sofer, Sofer. It was a 6-month study where they looked at carbs spread through the day versus carbs just all same amount of carbs all clumped up in the final meal of the day, and if you will, the backloaded carbs.
So carbs at night, right?
Carbs at night, that produced the superior results in terms of body composition and appetite and glucose control and all these different parameters. It was very interesting. So
could there be something with that if you're having carbs at night, then the glycogen replenishment? Maybe is there something along those lines? And maybe I'm just trying to spitball here and think what could be the mechanism there? Or we have no idea.
It could be, well, the authors would probably surmise that. Well, they looked at certain things like adiponectin levels, and it's possible that maybe the rhythm of our bodies potentially prefer carbs in the evening,
right?
But that remains to be seen.
Okay.
I personally think that is missing the forest for the trees, because I think that we need to prescribe diets on the basis of what the individual can stick to.
Right.
So if you take a room of 100 people and you have this hand-raising exercise, how many of you guys prefer most of your carbs at night? Boom, you'll get at least half the room, sometimes more. And then you ask them, how many of you prefer your carbs like in the morning? And then the next question, how many of you guys prefer your carbs every meal? You're going to get different answers.
Right.
So whatever the person likes and can stick to, that is really what matters, because in the context of active people, physically active people who maintain a lean and muscular body composition, none of this stuff really matters.
Okay. And I think that makes sense socially too. Obviously, most of the time they're not meeting during the week for a big breakfast, but they're going to go to dinner, a work dinner, or something like that. And then if you save them later for at night, then they don't have to freak out as much, when we're looking at that study. So I mean, that's pretty interesting. Yep. What do you think about fruit? People freak out over fruit. If they had a damn banana or berries or whatever, and they think they're going to get fat from eating some fruit.
That's ridiculous, dude.
Uh-huh.
It is ridiculous. Now you can build a case for fruit juice
Okay.
being an issue because it's a lot easier to drink down 300 calories of fruit juice than it is to eat 3 apples.
Right.
However, we just have to default to the evidence. With fruits, the evidence on the whole shows that they're either neutral or helpful to weight loss. And if you've been working for clients for any real length of time, and I know that you have, I've certainly been working with clients for a million years, the consumption of fruit has never been the problem for clients who are looking to improve their health or body composition. Nobody comes to me and says, Alan, I eat an apple, between every meal, and man, and late at night, geez, I just get this mad craving. I go and have like a banana and an orange. It just doesn't. It doesn't happen like that.
All right, so don't worry about the fruit. Has there anything that you've been over your course of your career you've been wrong about as far as whether you've made recommendations about or research?
Yeah. Oh man, the expose question. I was wrong about the post-exercise anabolic window for muscle gains.
Yeah.
So in 2003, there was this idea brought forth by John Ivey and Robert Portman in a book called Nutrient Timing. And they said that basically you've got within an hour to have really quickly absorbed protein and carbohydrate in order to recover properly and grow muscle. And so that kind of began the era of people just sucking down whey and dextrose within 7 seconds
Right.
of finishing their last set.
Like gummy bears and all sorts
Yes.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody did it. Everybody added sugar to their whey. People would go to the brewing shops and buy bags of dextrose. That was a thing in the bodybuilding.com forums. Like everyone's like, yeah, I found 2 pounds of dextrose for $5 in the brewing store. And I have to admit that I did that. I bought a bag of dextrose.
Okay. All right. I appreciate the honesty there. So, I mean, it doesn't matter as much now when the timing of the food as much, right? If you're lifting, and I mean, maybe if you're like a professional athlete or something, that might be a little bit different. But is it really mattering that much? If we're having our, for me, let's say my 150 grams of protein, does it matter if it's 1 meal, 2 meals, an hour before, hour after exercise? Does it matter?
This is the complicated answer to that. If your goal was weight or fat loss, and you were running a caloric deficit to lose weight, so you're taking in less calories than you're burning over the course of the day, the week, the month, the distribution of protein doesn't seem to affect that.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting. You can have theoretically like 1 or 2 meals a day, and then the guy next to you having the same regimen as you can be eating 4, 5, 6 times a day, and you're just clones, running this experiment. It's not likely that your protein distribution through the day is going to matter in hypocaloric conditions.
Okay.
So, and that's been seen in several studies now. Now, what we don't know, and what I would hypothesize is not likely, is that the same thing would happen if we're trying to gain muscle. If we're in a hypercaloric state where you're eating more calories than you're burning,
right.
I think that, and for the goal of maximizing rates of muscle gain, I would hypothesize that it does matter, that protein distribution does matter.
Okay.
And so I wrote a paper with my friend and colleague Brad Schoenfeld. I love to call him Saint Schoenfeld whenever I can, just to troll the man.
Yeah. He's got great research on this.
Yes. And we speculate that a minimum of 4 feedings of protein at roughly 0.4 to 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight each dose is going to maximize muscle growth in hypercaloric conditions. And so that's the hypothesis.
Okay.
But unfortunately, there's not a lot of research being done on optimizing rates of muscle gain. People, the public health problems at large are how do we get weight off of people,
Right.
and how do we maintain lean body mass? Those are more pressing public health concerns. So, our hypothesis of 4 protein feedings through the day, fairly evenly distributed at 0.4 to 0.6 grams per kilo, that might end up being a hypothesis until the end of time. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Makes sense. All right, we got a couple more questions here for you. Now, we touched on the plant-based and the Game Changers movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I know we can go down a rabbit hole with this, but I don't want to ask you the questions before. You said fad.
Mm-hmm.
How so?
Oh, where to start?
I know we can do an entire episode on this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you were to summarize for people who see this, who don't have any sort of like nutritional background, or what would you tell them to when they're watching this film?
Okay, number one, I didn't see the movie
Okay.
because I would probably want to choke myself out.
Okay.
And number two, any documentary based on with a diet theme, any one of them, is going to be biased towards entertainment first, views first, sales first, and then education a very, very, very far distant second. You never want to let the facts get in the way of a good story when it comes to filmmaking, and that is no exception with Game Changers. And we do have to look at certain things. I found this out sort of by accident, and the main guy behind Game Changers, the main funding dude, James Cameron, he's a raging vegan, I believe. And not only that, but he's got a major financial stake in the production of plant-based protein products, plant-based protein powders and supplementation and all that stuff. And so naturally, business-wise, it makes a good dovetailing with his product and business ventures to put this major film out. And but there's even other angles to look at it too. It's like this: we as a species would not be able to live on a vegan diet without supplementation. So there is essential nutrition that we miss out on by going full bore plant-based. And so just by biological design, humans are not vegans, period, end of story, done. Now, there is the whole argument of, maybe we have a moral obligation to the animals and to the environment to go vegan and all of that.
Yeah.
And then my response would be, okay, well, so suddenly the human species has to be a martyr for the planet. Now, why is that? Oh, because we're the smartest. Oh, are we? Are humans really the smartest freaking animals on
I've
the
met
planet?
a lot of dumb humans, man.
Well, if you go on Twitter, you'll know that we're not the smartest animals on the
I've met
planet.
a lot of dumb humans. All right, so as far as what you're saying is, it's kind of like the dairy industry funding its own research, and in the movie you've got these people that are involved in that are kind of putting it out there, and it's entertainment value. I did watch it. It was shot very well, and it was one of the most beautiful documentaries I've ever seen, but James Cameron was behind it. So, that is quite interesting. A lot of people don't know about that, but it did, I think, one good thing, whether, I'm not going to tell you guys my thoughts about it, but one good thing, it opened up the conversation for people to talk about nutrition even more. So that's a positive aspect of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there are some positive stuff. I'm
Absolutely.
all for. There's such thing as being what actually my wife she would say a plant-based omnivore.
Okay.
So you have a predominantly plant-filled diet that also happens to have some animal products in it. And that is really no different from what the public health guidelines have been since the beginning of time.
That makes sense.
So just the whole extreme of saying no animal products, that can kind of get very cultish, very religious.
Sure.
Did you bike to work today? Are you telling me how to eat?
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. All right. So if somebody, and this is the general population, if they want to lose weight, What should they be concerned about? Are they a certain amount of calories that you want them to cut? Is there certain, like, just a few vitamins that you would recommend, or or supplementation? What are a few steps that they can take right now?
For losing weight, it's going to be an equal emphasis, a 3-part equal emphasis on calories, protein, and satiety. Okay, so you have to be in a caloric deficit. You have to be consuming enough protein. I would start with that 1.6 grams per kilo or 0.7 grams per pound.
Okay.
And then you would have to focus on the foods that satisfy you most. You can't build a weight loss diet on foods that just leave you ragingly hungry all the time, because you'll be able to stick to the diet for 3 weeks and then you're going to go on a pizza and ice cream binge for the next month.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those would be the elements that I would look at.
All right, makes sense. Probably move a little bit more would be wonderful as well. Now, is there any certain vitamins that you tell people to take? Should they take a multivitamin? Should they take some sort of fish oil? What are some general guidelines?
Yeah, there are 4 micronutrients that are in low dosing in your typical 1-a-day multi. That would be magnesium, vitamin D3, calcium, and potassium. So while it's probably not a good idea to start dosing potassium in addition to your pre-existing diet, I would rather see people eating more fruits and vegetables to get their potassium. Eat more potassium-containing foods to get that. I would rather, instead of people supplementing with a calcium pill, I would rather them make sure they consume some freaking dairy if they can tolerate it. Right. If they don't have an allergy or an intolerance, get your cheese, your yogurt, your milk in.
If they can't, where should they get it from?
If they can't, well, then there's other calcium sources in the diet. Honestly, it can be pretty tough if you don't supplement with calcium unless you eat stuff like tofu will have some calcium in it. There are greens that do have an appreciable amount of calcium if you eat enough of it, but then there's this caveat of whether anti-nutrients such as the phytates, oxalates, whether those things would bind calcium and render them biologically unavailable. So with people who don't do dairy at all, you may need to supplement a bit with calcium. Now, there's some controversy over calcium supplementation in cardiovascular disease, but all of that research is a mess because it's observationally based, and there's really it's really tough to establish a causal link between those sort of things.
All right.
So I should be getting paid by Big Dairy because I'm a fan.
And you are not paid by Big Dairy, so we're going to point that out. Now,
magnesium is the other one that, I personally take magnesium. I personally supplement with magnesium. I personally supplement with vitamin D3. I'm not in the sun a whole lot. I get my tan from my computer screen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
it's a good tan, man.
Yeah, it bronzes me perfectly.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah.
Mine's from a bottle. I'm a white boy, so I got to do that.
The fish oil question is interesting. I would encourage people to eat fatty fish a couple times a week, at least, if they can. And if they absolutely refuse to eat any kind of fish or any kind of marine-sourced omega-3, then you can justify supplementing with fish oil.
Okay.
If people are vegan, then there's the algae option, and which is pretty funny because then you're going to be paying double. I don't know. The whole vegan question is very frustrating and face-palmy for me because they really are fighting an ideological battle, an ethical battle. And when they start trying to argue on the basis of nutrition and health, that's when their arguments really fall apart.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Now, where do you see the future of your industry and nutrition heading? Where do you think we're headed towards?
God, I don't know, man. What I would like to see it headed towards is how nutrition can best support the maintenance and or gain of lean body mass as people get older. So, I'm turning like 38, next year. So, I'm kidding.
I was gonna say, man, like you are younger than I thought.
I'm turning 48 next year, and so
you do look good. And I won't even say you look good for your age because I hate when people say that.
Yeah. I just look good. Period.
You look good. Just period.
Okay. I love you, man.
Yeah.
For the record,
I love you too, bro. Do you even live?
For the record,
cool.
Alan A. loves Joey.
Oh, great.
So I am very interested in the idea of how nutrition can prevent things like sarcopenia, things that I've kind of dealt with, on a personal level, seeing my dad basically lose a hell of a lot of lean body mass and the consequences of that. I think that it's very important to see how the combination of resistance training and nutrition can impact functional capacity. You're going to be a zaddy soon. I just learned that word like 2 days ago.
A zaddy?
Zaddy. Yes, Google it, man.
What is that?
Zaddy. It's a cashed up older guy who also happens to look good and be attractive.
Oh yeah, man, I'm a zaddy all the way. All right, I'm a zaddy. Hey son, if you're listening, I'm a zaddy.
Yeah. So with the rise of the zaddies coming through, and God, I'm so obnoxious with that. But yeah, no, it is important. I think that healthy aging is going to be a big one. Yeah. And of course, we're butting heads with the longevity nutters who don't even lift and telling everybody to restrict protein. Okay. So, sorry guys, but that's
all right. I like that. I think that's where we'll leave it. Alan, where can people find you?
AlanAragon.com, and I'm most active on Instagram. The Alan Aragon. Somebody has Alan Aragon. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the. It sounds egotistical.
Asshole.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Shame.
Regular Alan Aragon, and not the Alan Aragon. I'm sure you're a good person.
Shame.
Shame. And then you have your research review, which they could get on your website as well, right?
Yes, that's been going since 2008. I started the research review trend. You're welcome.
Nice job. You're welcome, world. All right, guys. This is Joey Thurman. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Fat or Future podcast. And remember, don't be a fatty.
Be a
zaddy. Yeah, see, that's funny because I didn't even say fat. Don't be a fatty is my tagline. FADDY, fatorfuture.com. Questions, comments, concerns. You can ask Alan. Questions and comments you can ask
Thank
me.
you, Joey.
Take care. Do something for your health today. Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure to follow on social at Fat or Future Podcast. You can follow me at Joey Thurman Fit. Don't be a fatty. Merchandise is available. Hoodies, hats, t-shirts, and beanies at fatorfuture.com. And make sure to check back next week. We've got a good episode for you.